Thank you for coming out today. This afternoon, Chief Davis will be providing remarks on yesterday's officer stabbing in our Fair Oaks district. Joining him today is our Major Elizabeth Melendez with our Major Crimes Bureau. Chief.
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon. We're going to show you a video in a few seconds that tells this story, but just a couple thoughts. There's a lot going on in our world, in our country, and there's a lot going on locally. So when a police officer, a uniformed police officer, is stabbed, but for the grace of God is alive, I think we tend to blow by it too quickly as a society, as a profession. So we want to take a moment to describe the dangers that were faced by a couple uniformed Fairfax County police officers just yesterday afternoon, right down the street in the Fair Lakes community. A 911 caller who ended up being our perpetrator. A 911 caller called and was rambling to a call taker on the phone about killing two people, about traffic, and a call for service was dispatched. So two Fairfax County police officers were dispatched to an area. They had no description of either a perpetrator or of a caller. So as they arrived in this general area, and again, it's broad daylight yesterday afternoon, they are attempting to gather more information from our dispatcher and from our call taker about a person who either called the police or is described in committing crime. So you're going to see that on this body camera footage. You're also going to see a person who ends up being our perpetrator who is 16 years old. He's a 16-year-old male, and we're going no further in his identification. You'll see that his image is blurred. In the body-worn camera footage, you'll also see that the image of our police officer is somewhat blurred as well. He's a victim of a violent crime, and we have to work through a few things with him and his family and his colleagues before we identify him, but we're not identifying him other than saying that he is a veteran of the Fairfax County Police Department, and he served in that capacity for several years. So as our two uniformed police officers are on the scene attempting to gather some better descriptors of the person who may be involved in a crime or of a 911 caller, you'll see a person sprint unprovoked toward a marked police car. The marked police car that he's sprinting towards is unoccupied, but the engine is running and the driver's door is unlocked. That police officer is out of his cruiser, and he's speaking with another police officer who is inside his marked police car. As the two uniform officers at one police car notice a person running unprovoked toward another police car, obviously in an effort seemingly to get into the police car, the officers run over to stop that from happening. That's when you will see very clearly, and we've slowed down the video and enhanced it for you to see it, you'll see the perpetrator, again, a 16-year-old, produce a knife, hold the knife in his hand, and wildly start swinging a knife, a fixed blade, at our police officer. The police officer was struck. The blade, I believe the entire blade or most of the blade was inserted in an area that Major Melendez will describe in his torso. The officer doesn't even realize right away that he's stabbed. They end up getting this person into custody. So that person is being charged with a felony for the malicious wounding of our police officer, but again, we're not going further in identifying him. The dangers of policing that are ever present, whether it's nighttime or daytime, or regardless of community or jurisdiction or geography, is something that we, as again a society and profession, gloss over too often. These police officers were responding to a call for service, and then with a great deal of bravery and courage, when someone is running toward one of their police cars, seemingly in an effort to get inside of it or to steal it, they approach him, they confront him. And from that, one of our police officers is stabbed, and thankfully he will live to fight another day. But it was only a matter of a couple inches or so, and we could have been having a much different on-scene press conference last night. Our fire and rescue department did a great job at the scene. Our own police officers did a great job at the scene, stabilizing him, transported to a local hospital where arguably his life was saved. These two police officers, both veterans, are crisis intervention trained police officers, and again, did the best they could when they were very suddenly and violently faced with a man with a knife who stabbed one of our cops. So we're going to transition to the video. I'll bring Major Melendez up, and she'll describe some more details, and we'll take any questions that you may have.
Stay down! You stuck?
No.
Give me your hand! You alright?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the other officer tase the suspect? Is that why he went down?
No, that's a great question and observation. It appears, and again, we're still kind of unfolding this and trying to put the pieces together. It appears that the perpetrator went down on his own somehow. The other officer did not use his taser. You'll see the other officer with his firearm in his hands. Certainly, the knife is a deadly weapon that was not only introduced to the scenario by this perpetrator, but was used to stab our police officer. So the fact that the secondary police officer on the scene had his firearm in his hand, and that's what you saw in the video, is entirely appropriate and consistent with our training. Both officers did have tasers, but this particular scenario was not conducive to a less than lethal deployment to respond to it. Yes, ma'am.
Chief Tisha Lewis of Fox 5,
Tisha.
is the 16-year-old suspect being charged as an adult?
No.
And did he confess to the crime?
So I can't go into what he may or may not have said to us. Obviously, thankfully, our agency, like most, has body-worn camera footage. So, again, the video speaks for itself. But he is being charged as a juvenile with malicious wounding of a law enforcement officer.
You mentioned the officer was struck in the torso. Where exactly and how did it happen?
I'll let the major describe that.
So the injured officer actually sustained a laceration to the left side of his rib cage, just right above his ballistic vest, under his left arm.
And is he out of the hospital?
He is. He has been released from the hospital. He's recovering at home, and he's receiving resources from our Health and Wellness Division.
Major Dave Lavelle with DC News Now. I
Sir.
know that the name is not being released because the suspect is a juvenile, but can you tell us anything about the suspect's past? Are there, is there a record?
The only thing I'll say, sir, is the police department has had interactions with him in the past, but because he is a juvenile, I can't go into the specifics of that.
How's the officer doing at this point? I know you mentioned he's a 16-year veteran.
The officer who was injured, he's actually a 6-year veteran, and that's fine. He's doing fine at this point. He's recovering at home with his family.
And Chief, just going back to what you mentioned earlier, if you would, just talk about, I think a lot of people just don't realize how dangerous it is for law enforcement.
Yeah, I think that's probably always been the case in society, where people don't realize the daily dangers and threats that police officers face. And unfortunately, and it's attributable to human nature, whenever one of these scenarios occurs, we all take a moment, or we should take a moment, to pause and reflect and realize how dangerous it is for a police officer to put his or herself in harm's way. And in front of you is a group of our pre-academy recruits, and they're preparing to go into our next police academy class in March. So they have taken the first step to a lifetime of service. It's a profession that you'll never regret, and it's the most meaningful profession on earth. So, but it requires a degree of risk-taking and bravery, and that's why we're so consistently focused on the best tools of the trade and equipment and training, because it is a dangerous job. And I do think the vast majority of society realizes that, but unfortunately, it takes a moment like this one to cause us all to kind of reflect and pause on it.
And so just to clarify, so when it says here that the unknown caller made statements to the dispatch center, that means he called 911 to say he did.
He did call 911, and when our police officers got to the area, there was no description of either a perpetrator, nor was there a description of the 911 caller. So when the police officers are there, both cars are parked. One of the officers gets out. That's our officer who ends up being stabbed, and he is standing next to the other officer who's inside of his police car, and they're communicating with the call taker and the dispatcher, trying to get any description whatsoever. Because the first order of business was for us to get to the scene where a crime was being described, a murder, actually. So once we got to the scene, we had to figure out who we needed to look for, and that's why the officers were there. Obviously, our perpetrator was in the background, within the view of the camera. He ended up being the person, and we found this out after the fact, who did call 911 and rambled about killing people in a traffic scenario.
Just how alarming or concerning is this for officers or the community that this involved a 16-year-old suspect who's doing this violently stabbing an officer?
Yeah, well, something has gone wrong in that young man's life. There's no doubt about it. I think that's something that we all can probably agree on. So the services, the help, the rehabilitation, whatever that young person needs to be an effective or a contributory member of society has gone sideways. It's sad when you hear about the age of it all, but it's something that doesn't necessarily surprise me as much as it is disappointing to hear when you hear of such a young age involved in such a violent crime.
Chief, why do you say that you're not surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised if police officers face danger every day. So if that better clarifies it. It's a dangerous job, whether you're making a traffic stop, whether you're responding to a domestic violence call for service, or whether you're just walking into a store to check on the welfare of the business community. So I'm not surprised that police officers face danger every day. It's not anything that paralyzes us or slows us down. That's what society wants us to do, to stand in between order and chaos. And sometimes that evolves into a dangerous scenario like yesterday. And I'm just glad our officer, who's a veteran and has got a long time to go in the Fairfax County Police Department, I'm glad he's okay. And thank God for a world-class medical system in the Northern Virginia community. And thank God for our fire and rescue professionals who helped save him yesterday. And I'm just glad we're here talking about his future rather than the worst possible scenario. Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you all, and thanks to our pre-academy recruits for coming out, and thanks for what you're about to do. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for coming out. This information and these videos will be on our blog. There will be a link there, as well as our YouTube channel. You can follow us on every channel at Fairfax County PD. Thank you.